Right now in America, thousands of truck drivers are losing their licenses, and sick drivers are at the center of the story. In this episode, I will walk you through what happened and how we got here.
13,000 commercial drivers were legally licensed in California.
21-year-old Josh and Preet Singh pleaded not guilty today.
The community that helped build America's trucking industry is suddenly under government and public scrutiny. Let's first answer why so many Sikhs became truck drivers. In America, there are roughly around 750,000 Sikhs, out of which nearly 150,000 work in the trucking industry, mostly as long-haul truck drivers. I'm sure you know at least one Sikh relative or friend who works as a truck driver in the United States. To understand this issue, we need to go back in time. In the 1980s and 1990s, trucking became one of the most accessible professions for new immigrants. Do you know why? Because it was relatively easy to enter. The barrier to entry was low. You didn't need a college degree. You didn't need specialized skills. All you needed was a commercial driver's license, a CDL, and the willingness to work long hours on the road. And the income, it was pretty stable. For many immigrant families coming to the United States, it was difficult to find skilled jobs. The education system was different. Language was often a barrier, and the culture was unfamiliar. So trucking became a relatively accessible and economically stable career option for many Indian immigrants, especially Punjabis and Sikhs. It allowed families to buy homes, send money back to their families in India, put their children through college, start trucking companies, and eventually build entire fleets. Over time, drivers helped each other. These drivers helped their relatives and friends get jobs and training. And Punjabi trucking networks grew across states like California, Texas, New Jersey, Indiana, Illinois. Now, let's talk about the incidents that ignited scrutiny. In August of last year, a tragic accident occurred on the Florida Turnpike. A Punjabi Sikh driver, Harjinder Singh, made a U-turn on the highway. 3 people lost their lives. Soon after, the Department of Homeland Security claimed the driver had entered the United States illegally through Mexico and had allegedly obtained a commercial license despite failing English tests. How that license was issued is still unclear and is under scrutiny. But the story quickly made national headlines. And then, just a few months later, another accident occurred. In October, a 21-year-old Punjabi driver was involved in a multi-vehicle crash in California involving 8 cars. These were tragedies. Lives were lost. Families were devastated. Road safety must always come first. It is absolutely non-negotiable. 2 major accidents, 2 Punjabi names, and suddenly the entire immigrant trucking community was under the spotlight. Now, how some of these immigrant drivers got driving licenses? To understand the controversy, you also have to understand how the system works. In the United States, when someone applies for asylum, meaning they're seeking protection from a country because they fear persecution in their home country, their case can remain pending for years. While the case is pending, they may receive a work permit called an Employment Authorization Document or EAD. That permit allows them to work legally in the United States while their case is still being reviewed. The argument is that people with pending cases should be able to drive to the hospital, to drop their kids to school, to do their chores, etc. With this authorization, many immigrants were also able to obtain something called a non-domiciled commercial driver's license. This simply means that the driver is legally allowed to work in the US but is not a permanent resident of the state issuing the license. With this license, they could operate vehicles like 18-wheelers, tractor-trailers, fuel tankers, freight carriers, passenger airport and school buses. By 2024, around 200,000 immigrants held these non-domiciled CDLs. That accounted for more than 5% of all commercial driver's licenses issued in America. So, working on a commercial driving license as an asylum seeker with a temporary work permit was not a hidden loophole. It was a part of the system. But because of these 2 high-profile cases that were widely reported in the media, the system began facing scrutiny, as it should. After the Florida accident, the federal government began looking more closely at how these commercial driving licenses were being issued. One important detail is this: in the United States, commercial driver's licenses are issued by the state governments, not the federal government. However, states must follow federal transportation rules. When federal audits were conducted, officials found something concerning. In some cases, these non-domiciled CDLs remained valid even after a driver's work permit had expired. Ideally, a driving license should only remain valid for the same period as the driver's legal work authorization. When those dates didn't match, regulators started asking questions about the validity of these licenses. Authorities also began enforcing English proficiency rules more strictly. Commercial drivers must be able to read road signs, communicate with officials, and follow safety regulations. Now, this triggered reviews of thousands of licenses. The federal government warned states that failure to follow these federal standards could risk millions of dollars in transportation funding, which rightly put more pressure on states to correct these issues and enforce stricter rules. In California alone, nearly 17,000 commercial licenses began facing cancellation. Soon after, Secretary of State Marco Rubio paused new work visas for foreign nationals seeking to become commercial truck drivers. So no new drivers. Then, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy announced stricter enforcement of CDL rules.
This is a license to operate a massive 80,000-pound truck that's being issued to foreign drivers who are not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents.
Which included stronger enforcement of English proficiency, ensuring licenses matched immigration status, federal audits of state-issued licenses. In December 2025, civil rights organizations such as Sikh Coalition and their partners filed class action lawsuits in the Superior Court of California. The case was filed against the California Department of Motor Vehicle after the state announced plans to cancel roughly 20,000 commercial driver's licenses belonging to immigrant truck drivers who were legally authorized to work in the United States. Their argument was not that safety should be compromised. Their concern was about the process. They argued that some drivers whose CDL expiration date matched their work authorization dates should not have their licenses cancelled. They also argued that licenses cancelled because of clerical errors, such as mismatched expiration dates, which we talked about earlier, should also allow drivers to reapply and correct their paperwork. Now, some drivers said they were not given enough time to correct documentation issues. And when a CDL is cancelled immediately, the result is simple. A driver can lose their livelihood overnight. The lawsuit asks the court to create a system that allows drivers to correct documentation issues rather than immediately losing their licenses. In a ruling issued on March 3, 2026, a California court ordered the DMV to create a process to prevent wrongful cancellations for drivers whose CDL expiration dates match their work authorization. For drivers whose license expiration dates do not match their work permit, the court ordered the DMV to allow them to reapply and have their licenses reissued within a reasonable time frame. However, the court did not stop the planned March 6 cancellations, meaning many drivers may still feel temporary loss of income while new processes are implemented. The issue was also discussed on the national stage. During the State of Union address on February 24, 2026, President Trump called for a proposal referred to as the Delilah Law.
That's why tonight I'm calling on Congress to pass what we will call the Delilah Law, barring any state from granting commercial driver's licenses to illegal aliens.
The proposal would prevent states from issuing commercial licenses to undocumented immigrants and strengthen English language requirements. A federal rule from Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which took effect on March 16, 2026, is expected to impact a significant number of immigrant truck drivers over time. The rule focuses on how commercial driver's licenses are issued and renewed for drivers with temporary or non-permanent immigration status. While many existing licenses remain valid until they expire, renewal now requires updated documentation tied more closely to immigration status. This means some drivers, particularly those on temporary protection such as pending asylum, DACA, or similar categories, may face challenges renewing their licenses even if they are currently authorized to work in the United States. As a result, industry estimates suggest up to 200,000 drivers could be affected gradually as their licenses come up for renewal rather than losing them immediately. This is different from what has been referred to as Delilah's Law, a proposed federal bill that would go further by explicitly restricting who can obtain a commercial driver's license, strengthening English language requirements, and requiring stricter enforcement across states. While the FMCSA rule is already in effect and focuses on administrative eligibility and renewal, Delilah's Law remains a proposal and has not been enacted. Supporters say it is about road safety. Critics argue that it could worsen the US trucking labor shortage. creating logistical bottlenecks and increase the number of uninsured or unverified drivers on the road. This could lead to higher prices for consumers, as a smaller workforce means companies may charge more to move goods. Now, there is another uncomfortable truth that needs to be discussed. Some industry insiders say certain driving schools may have prioritized speed and fees over proper training. In some cases, drivers reportedly paid high fees but were not fully prepared for English tests or safety standards. To be clear, this does not apply to every school, and it certainly does not apply to every driver. But even if a small percentage of schools fail to properly train drivers while charging large sums of money from new immigrants, it affects safety, it affects credibility, and the entire industry. In fact, regulators have taken action in recent months, revoking or investigating the accreditation of multiple driver training schools that failed to meet federal standards. Another issue you hear about is the logbook violations. Logbook violations in the trucking are common and frequently lead to fatal accidents by allowing fatigued drivers to exceed legal hours of service regulations. These violations are not specific to the Sikh trucking community, but the overall trucking industry, often pressured by companies to meet deadlines, cause slowed reaction times. Now, on the other hand, many members of the Sikh community chose preparation over resentment. In Stockton, California, volunteers at Gurdwaras began organizing English classes for truck drivers. They reviewed road signs, inspection questions, basic English communication. One volunteer explained that English is not their first language. They understand these road signs, but during inspections, they sometimes get nervous when questioned. More than 200 drivers signed up for these classes at a Gurdwara. Some Sikh drivers began reporting harassment. One driver in a news article said someone threw a coffee at him while he was standing at a gas station. When people repeatedly hear negative news stories involving individuals from a particular community, public perception can shift. History shows many examples of this. After the September 11 attacks, many Sikh Americans were targeted in hate crimes because their turbans caused them to be mistaken for Muslims. One incident happens. Sometimes an entire community carries the burden, and that reality is very painful. But it is not new to immigrant history. And guys, here's what I stand for. Accidents can happen to even the best drivers, and not just the bad ones. But following the rules, understanding road signs, and meeting safety standards is absolutely non-negotiable. Safety standards are important. English skills are important. Legal compliance is important. If we choose to work in a country, we must respect its rules. That means improving our English, keeping documentation valid, choosing reputable training schools, and holding ourselves accountable to high standards. But dignity matters too. When one individual makes a mistake, an entire community should not be judged. Harassment and racism are never the answer. When we enter someone's home, we respect the host's rule. But the host also has a responsibility to treat the guest with dignity. Trucking has offered many immigrant families a way to earn a stable livelihood. That opportunity should not be taken away, but it must come with responsibility, proper oversight, and due diligence. And immigrant communities must respond with preparation, not shortcuts. Because if history has taught us anything, immigrants rise, not through shortcuts, but through resilience.